Okay, so everybody, welcome to Vaginal Steaming in Medicine Beyond Instagram and into Healthcare. This talk is brought to us by a sponsor, the KISS Experience. KISS stands for Kesi's Yoni Steam Spa, which is outside of Charlotte, South Carolina. And Kesi is a steam hydrotherapist, a steam therapist who is in the medical field as well as certified in steaming. And she was so gracious to host this panel for us today. For more information about Kesi's Yoni Steam Spa, the KISS Experience, go to kyssexperience.com. Okay, so let's jump in. Today we have Dr. Yan and Dr. White joining us. These are my doctor friends, you guys. That's who these are. These are my doctor friends. Dr. White, I met from Facebook. She came into a Facebook group I had and she's like, "Hi, I'm an OBGYN, I'm an acupuncturist, and I steam, and I'm so excited to meet other people who steam." And I was like, "What?" Like, I didn't know this was a possibility. I didn't know it existed, So I think of her as a unicorn. I was like, okay. So we have a unicorn here in the group. And once I got to meet her, she has always lived up to that for me. So then I was at, my kids were in a school program, the Warrior Camp, and Stephanie, Dr. Yan was one of the other parents. And so we were actually drinking coffee, waiting for our kids to finish up. And, we were just chatting. We were talking about, nothing work related. And then she said something and I was like, "Oh, you're a doctor?" She was like, "Yes, I'm a doctor and a surgeon," And then I was like, "Oh gosh, I hope she doesn't ask what I do." So it happens. And I told her that I'm a steam educator and I train people how to use steaming and herbs. And she was like, "Oh yeah." She's like, "That's so cool." And then she talked about how important folk medicine is and her background, and that she's Filipino and she grew up using folk medicine. And, I don't know, Dr. Yan will say it for herself, but, seeing bush doctors and healers in the town. And then she started to be able to speak in medical terms about why something like steaming and herbs may be something that's beneficial, that people are seeing benefits from. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so anyways, we've been friends ever since. And she likes to call me after giving a talk. She'll listen to the talk and she's like, "Yeah, a couple notes." She's like, "That may be possible. The fibroids really might be melting out," but then she'll explain it in medical terms, And so anyways, I love to have, I'm just so excited, Dr. Yan, ever since I first, had that conversation with you, I've been wanting to, have a panel with you and have you in front of my audience. So without further ado, I will go ahead and ask the first questions to our doctors for the day, to our guests, which is, and I'll have you start, Dr. White. Can you tell us a little bit about your medical path? What is your current approach to medicine, and how did you get here?
All right, I'm going to try to condense this in pretty much as little words as I can, but I really want to say thank you, Kelly, for the invitation. This is an honor. It's great to see all these faces and to be sharing this panel with Stephanie and Dr. Yan. I really do appreciate that. So thank you so much for the invitation. So a little bit about my medical path. I knew I wanted to be a physician pretty much when I was about 4 years old. I knew that's what I wanted. I thought I wanted to be a pediatrician. But I fast forward a little bit. When I got to my pediatrics rotation, I realized I love the children, but I couldn't stand the parents. And I was like, this is not going to be a good relationship for anyone, because they're either going to put the paws on me or I'm going to put the paws on them. And it's not going to end well. Going back a little bit, women's health and social circles and women's circles have always been a part of my life. I remember my first period, my first, experience, going into womanhood. That's what we did. We started with steaming. And my aunts, my cousins, everyone was pretty much a part of that circle, whoever was nearby, or we went somewhere. So it was just a part of rite of passage, a ceremonial experience, and it was beautiful. I never thought of my period being something that I wanted to dread or anything that I wanted to not have. I mean, there were some days where I was a little tomboyish at some point. So there were some days that I was like, this thing is like going to slow me down, but I also didn't want to wear a bra or anything else like that either. So it was all part of just that, but I was able to balance the two and still be athletic and still be active and still enjoy the parts of being a woman. And so going through, through med school, through my subspecialty, I just realized that there was just so much disconnect between what I thought I wanted to do and be and how I wanted to practice when I became a physician and actually what was happening. I felt that there was just a series of me chasing symptoms, these condensed appointments where I was never really even being able to establish a relationship. And it was becoming frustrating. And so I was able to, when I got my MPH, I was able to travel and I did my capstone project on different healthcare systems in the world. And I traveled to Cuba. I lived there for 6 years, and I traveled to Haiti and I lived there for 2. And I really got to see what integrative medicine truly looks like and not what we call integrative medicine here when it's not truly that. We'll talk about that later, I'm sure, but I really got to see what it looks like and how it feels to be even to be a patient in that system. And so when I came back to the States after about 8.5, 9 years, I was so gung-ho about I'm going to change the world and everything's going to be different and women's health is just going to be what I designed and thought about it in my head. But it was like fitting a square into a circle peg, and it just wasn't working. And I knew I couldn't go back to private practice. I knew for a stint, I was the women's health consultant to the Surgeon General. So I had that kind of governmental aspect. And I loved that aspect of things. But when the administration changed, my job also changed. And so I knew I couldn't stay there either. And I was kind of in a crux. I was like, I know how I want to practice. I know that I can't go back. And I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. So my thing is, if the table's not built and there's no place that you want to work that exists, it's time for you to build your own. And that's what I did. We opened the center in 2018. And I had been practicing unofficially under the radar in terms of giving warnings to my patients. Listen, we never had this conversation, but this is what you need to do. It can't go in your medical record, that kind of thing, because it's not what's designed by the medical system. And so just giving that counsel, and it's saving people money, it's saving people time, sometimes saving people from unnecessary surgeries. And so really that approach is that integrative whole person, individualized approach is what my approach to medicine is, and it always has been. And in other conversations I've talked about, like, how did I get into herbalism? My grandmother was my first herbalist, and so that is one of the bedrocks of how I practice. And the active ingredient in all the pharmaceutical medicine is a plant. And so why just cut out the middleman, go directly to the plant, and get the active ingredient without all the other stuff that goes along with it. And this is how I got back here.
Wow. I love that. I have so many follow-up questions, and we'll wait until a little bit further. But you didn't mention that you were an acupuncturist.
Yeah, well, I said integrative medicine. I am an acupuncturist. I'm a clinical herbalist, and our practice, our firm, is an integrative reproductive medicine and women's health firm. We specialize in treating complex women's health challenges, and I am particularly into treating women over the age of 40 because they, pretty much that's that death sentence that you can't get pregnant, your ovaries are dried up, and that is our specialty. But we treat all complex women's health challenges in their totality.
You want to say something about your specialty in reproductive endocrinology?
Yes, there's that too. I try to say all these things because I was like, I don't want to monopolize the first question.
Unicorn.
I feel we'll get there. We'll get there.
Unicorn, you guys. She's got all the training. Okay, wonderful. Well, Dr. Laurena is also a specialist in fertility medicine and reproductive endocrinology. Okay, so let's move on to Dr. Yan. Same question to you, Dr. Yan. Can you tell us a little bit about your medical path? What is your current approach to medicine? medicine, and how did you get here?
So like Dr. White, I knew I wanted to be a doctor when I was 6 years old. I was in the Philippines, and my aunt was an OB-GYN there in our small rural town, and she opened up a clinic downstairs to my grandmother's house. And so whenever she had something, I would always help out. And whenever I could, I helped out. I was really interested in it. And then a vivid memory with somebody giving birth downstairs to my grandparents' house, and just trying to help her through that. I thought it was amazing, and it was something I want to do. And being in a rural town, people did exchanges. They bartered. They for that birth, she probably got a couple of chickens. So it was that kind of medicine that was really attractive to me, just being with the people and serving there. So all throughout high school, I was like, I want to be a doctor. I'm going to take the sciences. And then I went to UC Berkeley, and then I took a class in geography, and it got me interested in development studies. And actually, that's one of the things that made Keli and I very close, because she also has a development studies background. And so you learn about geography, you learn about international development, you learn about economics, finance, you learn about everything that pretty much builds up to what creates the systems around you. That's what development studies is. And so to help the most people, I thought that was a good background to get into. I still had the sciences in the background. I still took the sciences. I didn't, I took the prerequisites. And then I finished the sciences a year later after I graduated, and I applied for medical school. In the international development studies background as well, you learn about anthropology, and in that I was very interested in reading about medicine, men and women around the world, curanderas, what they're doing, the healing practices. So that was also in that mix of what I studied in international development studies. And then I went to medical school, because oftentimes I feel like, a lot of the stuff I did as a kid, it was a mix of modern medicine, Western medicine, and folk medicine. I remember vivid stuff that we did for folk medicine. Massage and body work was important when I was growing up. And then I wanted a way to make sense of it in a scientific way. And I thought the way to get there was to be a medical doctor, so that I can have both that folk medicine background, but be able to explain things or eliminate things that didn't fit the science. And so I went into medicine, exploring different specialties, thinking that I was going to be a family doctor because they did everything and they knew about everything. They're the smartest doctors on the block. And then, but then the realities of it, when you go into your clinical rotations, was just 15-minute visits. And I was just like, whoa, I can't do 15-minute visits. This is crazy. This is insane. It's not the type of medicine I want to practice. And so, and then I went into my surgical rotation, and I felt like, this is amazing. You manipulate anatomy in order to help aid in the healing. So I went into surgery. And then in the surgical field, there's I'm boarded in general surgery, but I'm also double boarded in critical care medicine, because critical care medicine is manipulating like physiology in order to arrive at healing. And so now I have that background of pathophysiology, then the anatomy, and then I can, practice medicine that I want to. And so integrating all my background, how I was raised with both the mixture of Western medicine and also folk medicine, and then learning about the foundational stuff of medicine, then learning about the anatomy, and then learning about like the ultimate physiology that critical care medicine in the ICU use, was just like amazing to me. And it makes me feel like I'm understanding pharmacology more, how herbs work more because of the integration, that interaction with the body. You can understand it better with that kind of in-depth learning about physiology and pathophysiology and pharmacology.
I love it. You two are two of the smartest people I know. Just so trained. I think one of the interesting things that that I noticed, you know, in common between the two of you is like your thirst for knowledge. Like you just continue to learn and learn. Both of you have degrees upon degrees, specializations upon specializations, you know, and yet both of you have that background of in your family using herbal medicine, and never, it's like you guys never dissected that, you know, and to me, that's the thing that's so interesting when you get to medicine. There just seems to be a complete disconnect. But like you said, Dr. White, when you're dealing with pharmaceuticals, there's an herb in there, you know, so you don't actually need to go through the middleman and all of the science of manipulating that herb, you know. And with Dr. Yan, I just love how you just the whole time you were just like, you know, learning and applying it to what your experience was, what your lived experience was growing up with healers all around you and in your family. It's just so incredible. So incredible. Okay, so now let's talk about then a little bit more about your personal experience. So Dr. White, you said that your family, you did steaming as a rite of passage. Oh, can you tell us more? Like, does your family come from, like, was that part of, like, where's your family from?
My grandmother's from North Carolina. Like
Can you tell us more about how your family has that practice?
That's where my grandmother.
Rural North Carolina.
Yeah.
No, this is so cool because, you know, this is something that, you know, when you look at steaming, it comes from all over the world. And you're actually one of the few people I know of who in the African-American tradition had that practice. I was thinking, oh, you hang out in Cuba and Haiti, so you got it from there. But I remember you saying that you did it in your own family as a rite of passage. And I met a grand midwife in Georgia who was telling me, and you know, from the African-American tradition of midwifery. And she said, oh yeah, she said, we steam. And she learned from her elders how to steam. And so that was like, when I first started to, you know, make these connections, even within the African-American community, we didn't lose that came over with us, you know, when we came from Africa. We brought over that practice with us. But anyways, tell us more about your experience with your, with steaming, your personal experiences with it. I know you did it as a rite of passage.
Yeah.
Did I know you've probably done it, you know, later as well.
Yeah, I'll try to, again, do my kind of walkthrough from childhood. I was a late bloomer, so I got my driver's license before I got my first period. I was not in any rush because my thing is, I don't want to have any babies. I don't need these for anything. And I don't want it stopping me from putting on that bra and all the other stuff that goes along with it. So I was completely cool not having it. I was actually at basketball camp when I got my period, and I thought I got cut. Like when I bumped into someone, I thought I got cut, but then I was like, why are you bleeding like from like in between your legs? Like that's not normal. I wasn't even thinking about my period. So I got my period at basketball camp, and I was like, oh my gosh, that means 1, everyone's going to know that I had my period. 2, that means I'm going to have to stop camp. 3, I'm going to have to like tell everyone. And I kind of like got stuff, you know, pads and everything else. I was like, I'm not using tampons. I remember calling my mom, and my mom is like, you're going to be fine. Do you have stuff? I didn't have anything, but everyone else did. Because again, I was 15, almost 16 before this happened. Everyone else had long since had their period. And so I went, got everything else on, and it was wonderful. I have been blessed that my period has been regular since the first one. I've had no misses, no weird stuff. Every once in a while with the full moon, something will get a little wonky. But other than that, nothing. And I really do attribute that to a good, not just feminine hygiene culture, but a family who embraced not only womanhood, but womanism, in the sense that they gave us pride in being a woman and what that rite of passage really meant. And it was story time. It was sharing time. Everyone would share their first experiences, where they were, how their period was, the importance of knowing your period, and being able to look at menstrual blood and all those things. And we were talking about them like we're talking about this now. And I realized I thought that was going on in everybody's household. And I realize now that wasn't going on in anybody's household. No one. And so when I got to school and to college, I was like, how do y'all not know about this stuff? Like, why are y'all asking like silly questions? Like, didn't y'all learn that? Not even health class, but didn't y'all learn that in like at home? And I just realized that no, these are not conversations that people were having about anatomy, physiology, menstruation, ovulation, luteal phase. Like none of that was happening. And it just shocked me. I'm like, how do y'all have babies? And how do y'all have this? And you don't know about what's going on in your undercarriage. Like it was flooring to me. So I've been steaming since I was 15. And I've been blessed with a wonderful reproductive life cycle. Again, no cramps, no anything, no clots, no any of those things that, people complain about. Ranges from like 28 to 32 days. Every once in a while, there's be a little wonky stuff, but nothing, wild. And again, my grandmother was the one who, welcomed me into the, world of womanhood. My mom through her, my aunts, and just overall my family. And my grandmother was my first herbalist. I really the herbs that we used in our steam came from her backyard. I didn't know what the stuff was. I just knew she would go out, she would pick it, she would get it. I was a migraine sufferer, and she did the same thing as a kid. Before I even got my menstruation, she did the same thing to help address my migraines. My family didn't believe in pharmaceutical medicine, one, because they had, their own natural healing methods, but also because we couldn't afford it. So there was a lot of just homeopathic, just home remedies and things that my grandmother knew the healing properties of. And that's the one thing I do regret, because I didn't get that like apprenticeship knowledge, because I didn't even know what was going on at that time. And I didn't recognize the gem that I had in her. And my mom, in the process of trying to, work from poor to middle class to upper middle class, she tried to put all of that behind and kind of not like disregarded it, but kind of didn't bring it with her. And she's like, your grandmother knows that kind of stuff. Or your grandmother, she would say, ask your grandmother, because she knows what we used to use that for, or she used to do this. But when my grandmother passed, kind of all that went away, except for some of the things that my mom did know. And so that's where I think I got my true excitement about herbalism and using it for clinical properties, not just one-offs in terms of in isolation, but that chemistry, that art, that science of that blend and what that blend can actually do in terms of health, wellness, and healing. And what benefits do I believe it has? I think it's all powerful. I think steaming can be one of the most powerful things when used appropriately, correctly, the timing, the right herbs, the right person, and with someone who knows what they're doing. And even though my grandmother wasn't trained and she didn't have, vaginal steam practitioner and peristeam hydrotherapist as one of her credentials, she was in tune with nature. She was in tune with her surroundings. She was in tune with the harvest season. She was in tune with the moon. She was in tune with the sun, because most of her life living on a farm, that's what it was about. And so I think we've really gotten away from just being living with the seasons and understanding the moon and the sun and the importance of that cycle of seasons, and how we can use nature and the gifts that, nature has given us for our own health, wellness, and healing. And do I refer it to patients? Obviously, we have a vaginal steam facilitator on our team. And we actually steam as a part of our clinical work.
I think Dr. White really brought up a good description of, as people who are interested in integrative medicine, we have to really think about two different types of medicine or science that's been kind of practiced. One is a lab science, things that are experimented in the labs with certain protocols, and that gets accepted into our Western canon of medicine. And then there's the population science, things that have been done in the community over and over for years, hundreds of years, thousands of years, tweaked to the different dosages people need, the types of herbs, the combinations of herbs. That is population science, things that have happened in the population with things that are accessible to people. And so the difference between the two, I think I feel like it's all about money. One takes money, resources to study. The FDA requires companies to come up with their own money to do the studies, the randomized controlled studies. That takes millions. Whereas the folk medicine, the herbal medicine, all these things that folk medicine traditionalists and practitioners in the community are doing, they're doing their stuff with hundreds of years and thousands of years of knowledge, and it doesn't cost money, and they're using herbs that are really cheap, and so there's no pharmaceutical company that's going to spend millions of dollars trying to study these things. And that's why I'm really a supporter for Keli in creating this research institute for steam, vaginal steaming, because I feel like it's a step in getting it accepted to a traditional science approach. And, you know, like she was mentioning about fibroids and how steaming can help with it. Well, I feel like that's an easy study to do, but where's the money for it? And so it's just coming out with people being interested in studying these things that otherwise might not make a lot of money, because really we control a lot of folk medicine. It's about production. It's about who's making money. If we do it, if we control it, there's no company or corporation that's going to make a lot of money out of it. So it's not going to be studied in the more traditional Western medicine way. And so I feel like it's a great start, and I'm really excited about Keli's ideas and her institute coming up, getting steaming out there. I'm just so very proud of her and so supportive of her. And it's, Dr. White, it's interesting when you were telling your stories about, like, you know, your first period and cramps. I had cramps all the time growing up as a teenager, and because I was from a culture that didn't really talk about it, you know, menstruation so much as your family, I suffered through high school with cramps. I went to college with cramps, and in college I went to San Francisco, and I lived with my Chinese aunt and uncle from China. Like, they were born there, they were raised there, and they just lived there. And my uncle was like, what's going on with you? Why aren't you getting up? And, like, you know, and I told him that once a month I get these really bad cramps. And he's like, I can help you. So he went to Chinatown, and he went to a Chinese medicine doctor there. Yeah. And he brought me boiled roots, a bowl of it every month for 3 months. And he says, just drink it. Just drink it. It tasted like dirt and water. And I was like, okay, I'm going to honor him to trying to help me because it's so cute. He was my uncle. It wasn't even my aunt. He was a language barrier. So I drank it. And after 3 months, I've never had it since. I've never had cramps since. And so I was just like, these things.
Never again.
Never again. Never again.
Well, I think it's important to highlight that I do use Chinese herbs. I am a Chinese medicine herbalist, you know, TCM practitioner. And everyone asks me, well, why don't you use Western herbs? And I find that Western herbs are very limited. They're very controlled. And again, I've been trained. I went to school for yet another, 4 years to get this training. So it wasn't like I just went into a weekend workshop and did a couple read a couple lines in a book. No, I went for a full training like an acupuncturist would, not like some acupuncture for doctors that you can go in and out in the weekend and put needles into people. No, I actually trained, and the Chinese herbal medicine dispensary is just so much more it's just so much more intricate. It's beautiful, and it's like the subtleties are just that. They make a blend turn into magic. And I have nothing against Western herbs. In fact, our vaginal steam facilitator uses, Western herbs. I use Chinese herbs. We're getting, similar results. But again, it's just the idea of just the beauty, the essence, the art and the science of it, and really knowing how to make subtle tweaks to really, get that person to that next level of health and wellness. So when you said Chinese medicine, I was like, oh yeah, that blend, I'm sure tasted like a little bit of ass and dirt.
Well, I also traveled to Greece to somebody from there, and I just feel like Western herbs, you gotta understand the things that have happened in history. And it was really interesting to me because I feel like the Chinese culture Indian, South Asian culture have done so much to preserve their books about medicine, to preserve their knowledge, make sure it's handed down. They have like, they have a
Yes.
parallel medical school. Whereas the herbalists and the folk medicine in the Western world have lost their knowledge. Their books actually burnt in these wars that they have stolen. Like, it's just, there's, when I talk to people in Greece, I'm like, well, oh, this is what Keli inspired in me. She was like, you know, you have interest in this folk medicine, you should do something about it. So I started a folk MD Wanderer site blog, and I talk about my travels, because this is when I travel, I'm interested in talking to the healers in the community. Like, that's, I go to them. I'm like, what healing is done here? So I was talking to the Greece, the Greeks that I was interacting with, and they were like, yes, that just makes sense. Like, my parents or grandparents did something with herbs and it worked, and it was something, but it's lost now. Like, they can't give it back to me. Like, what herbs? Like, I'm taking notes, and it's just lost knowledge. And so a lot of it is just, I think, the dominance of Western medicine and that traditional, you know, Western medicine look has just made that kind of knowledge not so preserved as the Chinese medicine and the South Asian medicine, the Ayurvedic medicine. All those things are handed down generations to generation, I think more intact, because it didn't have the onslaught of the just one way of thinking about medicine. And a lot of books in Greece were burnt through their many wars, and that had contained so much knowledge about herbs.
Oh, okay, gosh. Okay, guys. So Dr. Yan, you keep on saying the follow-up stuff that I wanted to say about what Laurena said, about what Dr. White is saying. But yeah, I mean, it's just so incredible. You know, that's one of the things about steaming. Is like, I've found records of steaming all over the world. You know, like Dr. Yan mentioned, I also have a background in international development. So I was kind of interested in how, you know, I was steaming, but then I started to understand, oh, steaming's not just, I had heard that it was Guatemalan and then Korean and then African. And I was like, where is it from? You know, and so I started to keep records of this. And it turns out that when you go back as far as you can to the earliest medical, you know, records that you can find, they all have steaming in them, every single one of them. Like the medical records that they, you know, that they, I don't know, that they got from the from Egypt, you know, from the pyramids, the medical records that they found in Babylonia. And then you get to Chinese medicine, where there's books that are thousands of years old and remedies that are thousands of years old that are completely preserved and available, you know, that you could buy, you could get into in a library. And again, they're filled with steaming recipes for different things. And it's usually called external therapies. And usually there's like there's steaming and soaking, and then rinses. And, you know, it's kind of goes into this category called external therapies in the classical texts. And so then finally I found actually Dr. acupuncturist
Christina
Gonzalez sent me this Italian book, so this old Italian book. And this is where this book was supposed to be, was the foundation of, you know, gynecology. It was like it was the Bible. It was the gold standard of gynecology in Europe up until a certain point. And it was written by a female physician. And again, it was filled with steaming remedies. And what was really interesting to me in this book is that it had a lot of the concepts that I had only heard in Chinese medicine. So for example, they were like, well, you have to know if somebody has excess heat in the body. They didn't call it excess heat, but I've only heard of this concept of excess heat in Chinese medicine, right? It was like, well, if somebody has excess heat in the body, then you need to give them cooling herbs, right? And every formula was tailored based on the body's energetics, based on the body's constitution, like the different cycle types that, you know, that the patients might have. And so that's when I really did start to make that connection, Dr. Yan. I was like, wow, we have Chinese medicine just had really great preservation of these, you know, of folk medicine. Well, now we would consider it folk medicine, you know, because we consider, you know, Western medicine dominant, but of its medicine. And I think all of the other forms of medicine around the world had a lot of the same concepts.
And I think
as well. It's just that, when you go into traditional Chinese medicine, that's where you can find, and read those books, and understand those concepts. But really incredible.
Once I come across those books, I actually do translations of what they're naming things. Like, for example, when they say excess heat, people with excess heat, I translate that in my scientific brain. Somebody is in the inflammatory state. So if somebody's in inflammatory state, they may have had a lot of sugar, carbohydrates, all this stuff. They're just inflamed throughout. They have painful, their back's painful, their joints are painful, they have gut problems. That's an inflammatory state. What you want to do is give anti-inflammatories. What are some examples of anti-inflammatories? You can do chamomile, there's different herbs. Yes. So anti-inflammatory, very powerful anti-inflammatory. So I do that translation in my brain when I read these things, because they really tie into physiology and what you can do to reverse the physiology that's available. And plants, medicine, food in general. My husband is interested in how food is healing. And so when we go places, when we travel, he looks at food and what people are eating, as well as herbs, because he also loves plants. But I feel like you can definitely reverse physiology with a lot of the herbs and a lot of the things you eat. And so paying attention to language, you can translate it to Western medicine science. So somebody who's more on the heat side of things is probably more in the inflammatory side of things. And then you want to do, herbs that are more anti-inflammatory.
And I don't remember who said it, and it's a quote, and I'm sure everyone's heard of it, but really letting medicine be your food and letting food be your medicine. And then you can address like so many other things just by changing your diet. I know that sounds so trite and so common, like, of course, just change your diet. But, there's just certain things, if you make some subtle shifts, it's not going to happen overnight because you didn't get to where you were overnight. But just making those shifts and intentional efforts in terms of corrective measures can go a long way without having to be on something that's, a pharmaceutical or, something else or another supplement. Just, work on, changing the diet and actually what you're putting in your body.
Exactly. When I have a canker sore, I get the numbing medication from the store, but I also know that I have to go slow down on my carbs and sugar. Those are all inflammatory. Put in more turmeric in my diet, put in more chamomile in my tea. Like, I do that. As a doctor, I do that because it's knowledge from both sides. Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I love that. I just want to say, Dr. Yan, I really believe that's one of your gifts, is how quickly you're able to translate this. Like, this doesn't have to be, these are seemingly two different paradigms of medicine, but when you have that translation and you draw those bridges, you can actually, again, kind of have this integrative approach, right? Where where these don't feel like these alien things, right? And one of the things that's so cool about when you start doing that is that it's like, it makes it okay for people who only are used to Western medicine or only are used to listening to this doctor to now be able to understand, inflammation or excess heat, and that they need cooling things, right? And it's just, I think it's one of your gifts in this world.
Well, I also think that
Dr. Yan, and actually, just so you guys know, we were supposed to talk about this at the end, but she started to collect stories, and you can actually go to her blog and submit some stories of folk medicine that you've done. And then Dr. Yan does her job of translating it and explaining it in medical terms, which is just so cool and so incredible. So you guys make sure that you check out her blog. Okay, sorry. And did you?
Well, I was
want to say
thinking
more,
about
Dr. Yan?
why traditional medicine is just something that people gravitate towards. I think because it's accessibility, but it's also something action oriented. You're not receiving medicine prescribed by a doctor. You're receiving knowledge and how to change your lifestyle and how to change your approach to your day. And so it becomes more accessible and it becomes more action oriented, and it puts the power back in you, not so much as somebody giving you that knowledge. I feel like there's power there, and it's accessible, and it's the focus is you. What are you going to do to stop yourself from being inflamed? Right. What are you going to do? It's that simple. And I feel like that's the power of folk medicine, traditional medicine, that sometimes is lost in the Western medicine when it's so prescriptive.
And I think, again, you hit on like such a good thing, is like, it is so simple. And I think the simplicity of it is sometimes a turn off, because it's like, oh, I must have to do more, or I must have to do this. And I'm like, all I want you to do is take that cup of herbs every day. And yes, I understand that it tastes bad, but let's go back. You're taking medicine that was never designed to taste like cotton candy. Cotton candy is how you got here. All those things is how you arrived at the spot. Medicine is designed to feel like a position. And so if you take, the herbs are going to not taste good because you're out of balance. The moment you start to get back in balance, I tell people all the time, you're not even going to remember that they taste bad, because they're going to not taste bad because they're no longer the appropriate blend for you, because your condition is changing. And, you were had this practice way of being for some women, for some of our clientele, for decades. And you think taking, your herbs sporadically for 2 weeks is going to like dramatically change your situation? That's not how it works. You've been dealing with this for 20 decades. So in 20 months of concerted work, maybe we can, that's when we can start talking about, is this working or not? But when you've had, 20 decades, and I always tell my clientele, for every year of this problem, give me a month. And they're like, well, I've had fibroids for 10 years. Okay, a year from now, let's talk. After we've been working together for a year, and they're just like, what do you mean a year? And I'm like, so what exactly did you think was going to happen? Like, it's just like that disconnect between that instant gratification that is sometimes frustrating, and like, oh, the herbs don't taste good. And like you said, you acknowledge it. And I acknowledge they don't taste good, but neither does your situation taste good either. So
that's a good point about time frame. That's a really good point about time frame. I treat hemorrhoids as well. And when somebody comes into my office about hemorrhoids, and I said, give me 6 months, at least 6 months to fix this, because it's about habits. It's about your diet. It's not just me giving you a hemorrhoidal cream. That's a cover. That makes you numb. That makes the skin numb, and you don't feel your pain from the hemorrhoid.
Right. But how did we get here?
How did we get here? To fix that hemorrhoid, I have to work on your diet. You got to have lots of fiber. You got to do sitz bath. Sitz bath, similar to steaming. You add magnesium into it. There's heat, there's absorption, very similar to steaming. And so you do need time to reverse things that have been caused by decades of habits.
Yeah.
You know what I think is so interesting about this? I think I just like a little bit of perspective for anybody who's listening. These are both surgeons. Dr. Laurena didn't mention, Dr. White didn't mention that, but both Dr. White and Dr. Yan are surgeons. They both actively, perform surgery at hospitals. So they can just do the surgery, but that's not what they're looking for. You see, like, I think that's so interesting that both of you can just go do that fix, right? But that's not what you guys are looking for. That's not what you actually want for your patients, Woo, okay. Friends, Dr. Friends. Okay, we got to go on to the next question. I just did want to say, about about Dr. White's experience with growing up with a grandmother who is I would call her a folk gynecologist. I really do believe that. She was a folk doctor, a folk gynecologist, right?
And a doula and everything else.
And,
like the original
right. Midwife. She could do it. She could get it done, right? So, you have these folk doctors, or we call them bush doctors, or like there's different terms that people call them, but and I loved that Dr. Yan brought up, this population science or folk medicine, and so this term population science is a really interesting one to use. But the reality is, she did have knowledge, right? And this knowledge, has thousands of years of history. She was trained, she did learn from her mom or her grandma. And actually, Dr. White, I hear it skips a generation. It's like, like maybe my kids won't be so interested in herbalism, but then their kids will be,
Right. Because my mom definitely was.
So maybe you were the one that, your mom was like, cool, but she had it. She didn't really have to worry about it. Right. But you had to worry about it because, grandma, got older, right? So, So, but I think that was so interesting what you said about how your experience starting your period and having all of those herbs around you even before you started your cycle is why you've never had any pain.
When I hear people
really believe
about
that that's
the
true.
pain that they go
You
through,
have not
I'm like,
had
I
pain,
understand that
and
it's
you have
real,
not had.
but it's like I've never had that. Like I don't. When you talk about period
Not
cramps,
once.
I don't know. Yes, I know what pain is. Obviously, I've been in pain before, but not during my menstrual cycle. Like it doesn't slow me down. I stop because I'm bleeding, because I'm like, okay, your flow is starting to slow down. But otherwise, no, it's just another day.
Right. And you learned that you do need rest at that time. You need rest at that time, right? That's something that your family taught you, right? That's something that was passed down to you. And so anyway, so it's just remarkable to me. It's like, I think, steaming is having this moment where, first of all, I was asked to create an Instagram account. So I have nearly 40,000 followers, but one of my first customers who I made herbs for was her name is Erlinda, and she's on Instagram at Girl Gang Steaming. She's the coolest. But she was like, "Girl, we are on Instagram, and I'm trying to tell people about your herbs. I need you to create an account." And I was like, "I have like Facebook." And she's like, "No, I need you on I'm like, I'm trying to send people, like, they need the herbs. Like, can you get on Instagram?" So I just created a little Instagram, Steamy Chick. And without anything, knowing anything about Instagram, I now have 40,000 followers, right? And what that is the need. There are so many women who are seeking alternatives. There are so many women who don't have doctors like you two, who only are getting the option of surgery, or they're doing procedures, or they're using pharmaceuticals, antibiotics, and just having recurring issues. And so, like, what I get is a lot of people who are seeking help for recurring bacterial vaginosis, fibroids with the only option of hysterectomy, and infertility. Maybe they've already done fertility treatments and they didn't work, or they can't afford fertility treatments, right? So these are the main people that actually are seeking steaming, okay? But coming of age, 13-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 10-year-olds, this is actually when I think people should start steaming, not when they're in their, like, my main demographic are women from 35 to 45, right? Who are already dealing with 20 years of issues, right? But what I really want to see is steaming integrated at that, right when somebody starts their cycle for the first time. That's when steaming should be introduced. If it's brown, so, people have, and we talk about it in my classes. What was your first cycle like? And people share all different kinds of, situations that they had. Some people started when they were 8. Some people started when they were, and it was completely brown. And there's just different situations. All of that, I think, should be dealt with then, not, not when this person is 35 and trying to get pregnant and can't get pregnant, right? So anyway, so I think that's just so cool that you do make that correlation. Like, we could never prove that scientifically, that you haven't had period problems because of, because you steamed and had herbs when you started, and because your grandma gave you that. But I do believe that if we did a study and we grabbed, 100 girls, and we had them, steam versus 100 girls who didn't, and then you looked at their, 10 years later, their periods and, their health, I think that we would find, a lower, I feel like lower rates of, pain, endometriosis, fibroids, among the girls who had that, earlier on. And then that's so cool that you shared your story, Dr. Yan. I actually, I love herbalism. I love, what did you say?
I said, for the skeptics also that want to, try, like, let's say they have fibroids and they want to see if it's really working. I feel like there's different ways now, because we have powerful technology that you can do the treatments, first, before you do the treatments, get ultrasounds of your fibroids. You can do the treatments, and 6 to 12 months later, compare the sizes. I feel like it doesn't have to be all or nothing. If you're a skeptic, try it out, see if it works out, because what's the worst thing that can happen? You get a hysterectomy, you get your uterus out, and we don't want to go there. But if you can try other stuff, try it, work with your doctor. There's ultrasounds readily available now, so you can get before and afters. You can do your own studies. You can control your own study. It's a study of one, control it. Like, do things that will empower you rather than you're stuck in a place where you're skeptical about something and you're not moving. Do something, you know?
And I think, like you talked about that serial ultrasound, one of the things I build in is, you know, get that. If you don't believe me or you don't believe in this concept, that's great. I don't need you to believe in the concept. I need you to believe in me. I would not ask you to do something that I don't know works. And there's like, again, I was like, if you want to talk to someone who, you know, has, you know, gone through this process, we can do that. But the main thing is, like, in 3 months, your fibroids are not going to be gone, depending on how many you have, what size they were, where they are. They're not going to be gone, but are you going to start feeling better? And that's usually the trajectory, is that in 3 months, yes, they may be the same size, but you're not going to have any more. And the ones that you had didn't grow, but you're also feeling better. Your period has changed. Okay, so that is an improvement. No, the fibroids, yeah, they're still there, but are you better? Are you still calling out and taking vacation days because of your period? No, you're not doing that anymore. Are you still bleeding through your pants? You know, why, or not going to work because you're bleeding out? No, that's not happening anymore. Okay, yeah, the fibroids are still there. They're still in your body. They're gonna be. So now let's work on this next 3 months. All right, month 6. Oh, you had 6. Now you only have 4. And those 4 are smaller than they were before. At 9 months, what are we at? And so I think there's still that approach to, they're not going to just up and disappear overnight after all this time, but are you going to start getting progressively better and seeing the changes in your life? And that's what is where healing is taking place. I think a lot of times, like, we forget that component of health and wellness. We think about the food, the exercise, the modalities and what we're doing, but are you actually healing? And healing is not a destination, it is ongoing. It ends in ing, it's a gerund. That means it's ongoing, it is still happening, and it will still keep happening until the day that, you know, you aren't here. So I guess, I mean, it's just that process, that ongoing process, and it's still going to require work, especially when you're working on something as complex as, for instance, uterine fibroids or PCOS or even chronic fatigue. But it's going to take time, and it's going to take effort, and it's going to take intentionality and work on the behalf of the client and the person who's, you know, looking for that healing.
Okay. Wow. All right. Okay. So somebody in the chat was like, I'd love to, you know, help with a study and so forth. And so again, you know, I think you spoke to that, which is, both of you spoke to that, is, you know, really when you are in power of your own health, you can try your own things. You don't have to worry about if there's a major medical study about that. So that's the first thing I want to say about that. The second thing I want to say about that is that both of these doctors are available to do studies. So if anybody can get $1 million or $2 million, if you know foundations, these doctors will study that stuff. I already talked to Dr. White, and she said, yep, she said, my clinic's open. I'd love to, you know, if you get the funding, we'll do the fibroid study, you know, so we can all design studies. I can be a consultant. We can all design studies, but we're also all actively helping people avoid hysterectomies, right? Like, so, you know, like busy. So if anybody does like really, you know, want to put that funding in place, we need doctors like Dr. Yan and Dr. White who have their, you know, the ability to be able to move forward with something like that and have a study that people would actually acknowledge. So anyways, that might be, you know, if somebody really is interested and wants to see a study on steaming, you know, like a large scale study, we have the resources, we have the, you know, wonderful doctors like these that are interested. So it's really a matter of getting like a foundation or a private donor who would give, you know, what it would cost for the studies. And I did talk to a university about doing a study on steaming and bacterial vaginosis, and they were saying they need a $5 million for an introductory study on it, which I was like, whew, okay, you know, one of these years when I have time to do some fundraising, you know, then I guess I might get back around to that. But if anybody's a fundraiser or wants to talk to foundations or individual donors who want to see these studies done, that can happen. So anyways, that's like, I think the main thing in between, you know, actually having a medical study. Now, we don't need that for ourselves. For ourselves, we are empowered. We do what we need. But the medical study helps to save so many other people because it gets more doctors on board who can say, oh yeah, this study just came out and start referring it, because everybody they're not the gems and the unicorns that we have here today who already just understood and grew up with that frame of reference and didn't create that that dissection, between those two forms of medicine. Okay. So on that note, when do you recommend studying? Steaming. Sorry. What I would like to hear from each of you is, and I'm going to start with Dr. White because I know she's been doing steaming a lot more actively. She has a steam facilitator on staff. I wanted to see in what situations in particular do you recommend steaming to patients? And then can you also share a specific case where a patient steamed and what the outcome was, just to help, for any doctors or other people in the medical field that are watching this, just to really understand, how this can be used.
All right. Well, our firm is an integrated reproductive medicine and women's health firm. We specialize in complex women's health challenges. So the complexities that are prevalent in all of women's health: uterine fibroids, PCOS, endometriosis, infertility or fertility challenges. I try not to say infertility, I say fertility challenges. And then all the other stuff, the menstrual dysfunction, the hormone imbalance, the chronic fatigue, the fibromyalgia, things that are just we just don't know, or it's multifactorial and there's just not a pill for that, or there's just not a surgery for that. And it's just you've got to do, it didn't get here, with one thing. So it's going to take a lot of other modalities working together synergistically to address them. So, and that's what we use steaming for. Pretty much everyone steams unless they absolutely don't want to, or they just can't for whatever reason. And the specific case, and I think I use this case all the time because it just shows how powerful intention and willingness and desire to get better and to heal really does work. And it frustrates me sometimes because I feel like so many people are right on the other side of that breakthrough, but it's I've been doing this for 3 months and nothing's changed. But when I go back and look at their records, I'm when you came, your period, your period was irregular. And it was every 45 days. While not every 29 to 32 days, it is now every 35 days. That has changed. Your cramps, you said they were a 9 when you got here. You weren't even going to work, and you can't talk to me about your cramps. You said you were having, breast tenderness and, all this type of pain, backaches, headaches, all these. But right now, those things are not part of your story. So while you are improving, it does take that kind of bigger picture to help someone even remember you are better than you were when you first crossed our threshold. So the case I always use is the first time that I ever used herbal therapy, vaginal steaming, acupuncture, a health and wellness coach, a nutritionist to address uterine fibroids. I was actually a student at the time, and she came to me because she was someone told me to come to you because you're a doctor, but you also have this integrative approach. And she's I want to get rid of my fibroids. At the time, she was definitely perimenopausal, in her early 50s. She had about 45 fibroids, maybe around that area, of varying sizes, varying locations, to the point that she looked like she was 6 months pregnant. She's been done having kids. I shouldn't look like this. I don't want to look like this. People are asking me if I am pregnant, knowing good and well that I'm not. She's the weight gain, all the other symptoms. And so at that point, I was a student. I had literally no amount of knowledge except for what my instructors were giving me, and I knew how to steam. So the thing that I knew how to do was steam, and I got help from acupuncture, the nutritionist, and the herbalist. I was learning herbs at that time, so I was almost absorbing everything. I was super nerdy, so I lived and breathed herbs, and again, nerded out. And so with that combination and steaming, again, helped her get a steam sauna and, put the herbal blend together. For that first 3 months, we were talking about with serial ultrasound, she's all I want to do is avoid getting a hysterectomy. I don't want my uterus taken out. That was her main and end goal. She's I just don't want that. I said, how much time do I have? I was I'm only a student, so I don't even really know what I'm doing. But I know, protocols, and I know procedures, and I know, the different tastes and, energetics of these herbs. So I can work. And she's I'm willing to try anything. And that's the one thing about women's health. Usually our clientele is already engaged and ready when they arrive on our door because they've already tried everything and it didn't work. And so I said, okay, let's do this. And so between steaming, she was steaming once a week, because her period was regular. She was still having one, but it was just the pain she was in, the bloating, the boggy uterus that was huge. And so again, she was like, I just don't want to look this way. I don't want to feel this way. For her, it was more aesthetics. There were some other symptoms, but again, it was more aesthetics than anything else. And in that first 3 months, like she had about 45 varying sizes. I think the largest one was about 15 centimeters. And anywhere, I think between 42 and 45, I can't remember the exact number. And at 3 months, instead of having 45 on the ultrasound, they could only find 38. So my thing is using the same ultrasound, you know, tech and everything else, and you can see the improvement. There's less there, but her symptomatology was different. She's like, I feel better. Was she, you know, did her belly go down? No, they were still there. She still had the belly, but she was like, I don't feel tired. I'm not fatigued. I'm not bleeding heavy anymore, as heavy. She was still bleeding heavy, but not as heavy. 6 months later, we tweaked the herbs, we tweaked the blend. We were still steaming. We changed the blend that she was steaming with. And after that, you know, 6 months, it was a combination of, okay, all of these things, changing her diet, changing her exercise regimen. Movement was a big thing. She's like, I haven't exercised and I don't even know how long. So actually just engaging her body, that's increasing your uterine circulation and your blood flow. And that's what's being hijacked when fibroids are growing in your uterus, your uterine circulation. And so just changing the dynamics of how blood was moving through her body. And so then at 6 months, again, number of fibroids, almost in half, around 22, 21. And she was like, I feel great. I feel wonderful right now. And she had already lost about 20 pounds. So now we're starting to see, like, there's proof that the ultrasound's not lying. I can't just, you know, pick and choose where they're not there. They're gone. So yeah, there were probably the smaller ones, but that largest one that was 15 centimeters, by 6 months, it was down to 9 centimeters. That we can, you know, trace that. We can follow that. That's where it was, the location. And now at 9 months, she said, if we don't do another thing, she's like, I feel good. She had lost like pretty much the amount of weight that she wanted to lose. She's like, she's like, I know they're still there, but she's like, I don't feel the way I felt, you know, 9 months ago. And she's like, I want to keep going to see what we can do. So at the end of 12 months, she continued, she made a lifestyle change. She committed to a lifestyle change. And at the end of that 12 months, she still had fibroids, but instead of having 20, she had 6. She had 6 fibroids, and the largest one, that large one, was under 6 centimeters and was around 3.5. She still had fibroids in her body, but she's like, this has been life-changing. But she plugged in, she bought in, and she could see the changes. And I think that's been the biggest theme story, because I know it wasn't just steaming by itself. I also know it wasn't just acupuncture by itself. It was also her perspective and her, you know, outlook on life was changing as she was being able to plug back into her activities of daily living. So I don't want to emphasize that it's steaming only, but steaming was a part of it and always will be, just for that maintenance. And now I see her about every 3 months. She comes in seasonal checkup and she's steaming at home. She's like, that's the one thing. She's like, you know, she comes in for acupuncture every 3 months and she'll come in for, you know, she steams at home. And she's like, this is something I don't want to give up because it's my time. It's my personal time. And she's like, and that helps me deal with my mental health, not just my physical.
Wow, that is so incredible. And so she was steaming once a week throughout that time period?
Once a week, yes, throughout that time. We changed the blend, but she only steamed once a week.
Yeah, and I think what's also really important to understand here is that, you know, when you're somebody steaming for fibroids and for like a major issue, that it's important to work with a practitioner, a steam therapist who knows when to change the herbs and why. Are you getting the results you want? You know, do you need something different, right? A lot of times people think that steaming is do it yourself. And so I do talk about steaming for fibroids and endometriosis, PCOS, all of these. And I think, you know, one of the things that gets lost is that people think that they can go to YouTube, find a tutorial, or even go to my website and find my user guide, and that's going to, you know, get them the results of, you know, canceling a hysterectomy or getting their fibroids down, like how this woman did. You have to work with a trained steam therapist who knows which herbs, and also a schedule that is going to be able to get that. And actually, I do recommend weekly steaming. I think weekly steaming is a great start for anybody, but I also think it's so important to work with a practitioner. Dr. White I think you were doing it yourself at that time. And then now she has a steam facilitator, a steam therapist on her staff to be able to, work more closely and make sure that somebody.
And I was a student at the time.
Who's watching the steaming for her patients, right? Where she might be doing the acupuncture and some of the other elements. What do you say?
Oh, I said I was a student at the time, so I should have been giving away vaginal steaming
right.
anyhow. So that was like another thing of like, we're going to work outside the system.
But you worked it. You were working. Right. Now, can you tell me what that?
Oh, go ahead.
That was so interesting to me that you were working with steaming. You said you were working with herbalism, and I think you said nutritionist, and I know you also mentioned a health coach. Is that your model of care right now? I'm sure I know that was when you were starting out, and you saw that you were getting the results. And so I know your clinic you set up with the different modalities of care. Can you tell us what and who you have on staff in order to be able to continue to get those results? And also, I know now that you're set up and you have it established that you're able to even get the results faster. I know that about
yes,
you.
That is so very true. So we have an integrated practice. It's myself. We have a raindrop therapist. April's also our vaginal steam facilitator. We have a dietitian, nutritionist, a nutrition counselor, a health and wellness coach, a chiropractor. We're bringing on a midwife. We have a sexologist, a lactation consultant, a doula, yoga therapist. She does prenatal yoga as well. She does Thai yoga body work, and she also does dance movement therapy. We have a couple of Reiki practitioners, and I think I'm forgetting something. But yes, we have a large team.
A coach.
Getting ready.
You mentioned a coach. Like a holistic health coach or something?
Yes, a health and wellness coach. Mm-hmm.
So cool.
Yeah, and a lot of people think a health and wellness coach is like, I can do this on my own. Listen, if you could do it on your own, you already would have. You need an accountability partner, and that's what she is. She really just takes, like, when we sit down in a team, she sits down, she's writing down what are the goals, who's being seen, and she's your accountability partner. She's your cheerleader, your rah-rah person. Sometimes your accountability partner cannot be your girlfriend, your husband, your bestie, because they're not invested in the same way that you are. Yes, they love you. Yes, they care about you, but it's your body. And your health and wellness coach, because guess what? We specialize in results, baby. And so if you're not getting there, we don't get paid. So the idea is to help you stay on the train, on the track, so that we can give you these little hacks that, okay, you don't like to take your herbs because they taste bad. Guess what? All I want is it to get into your body. You don't want to cook your raw herbs. We'll give you, powder. The one thing I try to steer away from is pills, because I want it to look and feel different, because that metabolism starts with the moment it touches your tongue. But again, we have little hacks to help you even get your herbs down. We have little hacks to help you, plan your day, structure your day. And so accountability, a health and wellness coach, is not just, another person we tag on the team. There's that person who helps you keep on track.
And in my exploration of folk medicine practitioners and practices around the world, I feel like you have to give a little bit of respect, or a lot of respect, to the practitioners who've studied it. And it is things you can do at home for yourself, but there's good caution in, if you want to try something, to do it in a guided by somebody who's practiced it for so long, or taking formal studies. And I'm not just saying weekend fly by things and then now you take it and run with it, because herbalist medicine, Chinese medicine, all that stuff takes 4 to 6 years of knowledge to get it right. And so I feel like you need that guidance from people who are doing it day in and day out. But then you also need the formal studies, these certifications that Keli offers, because you don't want to just run with it, because there's certain indications that I feel like can be worsened by steaming, can be worsened by heat in general. So you have to know when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate. And I think these courses that you have laid that out really well. And as far as me, I want to make it clear to people that I may be talking about vaginal steaming, but I don't do it regularly. I've done it once to try it, but I don't do it. But I see a lot of credence to it. And I can see how the science works. And I would put, for myself, not knowing, not being an herbalist like Dr. White, I would put the categories that I would use steaming for, or heat therapy in general. We use a lot of heat therapy in Filipino folk traditional medicine when it comes to viral illness. We heat up the body while drinking cool liquids, like we try to sweat it out. That's something we do. So with steaming, vaginal steaming, I would put things in based on what I know about science, 3 categories. So anything with tears, lesions, mucosal surfaces that needs healing, you want to bring back the blood supply to that area. And having good blood supply to the area, you want to dilate all the vessels in the area. So steaming can help with that. The herbs used, like we had mentioned before, there's things that are anti-inflammatory. And so Dr. White can speak to more of that. Those are the things that you would hit for anything with inflammation, anything that needs healing in that area. And we haven't touched on this much, but actually sitting on that throne, paying attention and focusing your energies into the part of our body that we usually don't focus, or culturally they shun focusing on, actually heals a lot of the trauma. So I feel like in a trauma situation, when the steaming, the vaginal steaming practice is guided well, and it's in a safe environment, it can actually bring a lot of healing to trauma, to the area, or anything associated with our with that anatomy. I just feel like that gets often left out, and I get conflicted when I read online about vaginal steaming, how it makes you feel dirty. It doesn't, though. It does the opposite. It makes you focus on the parts that have been made to feel dirty, have been spoken about in very hushed terms. I just feel like that doesn't ring true in the experience, my experience going into a vaginal steaming session. It was actually me and my practitioner talking about it, making it special, making it the focus. And then on the way there, my daughter was so interested, like she's like, "What are you doing? Can I go with you?" And on the way there, we talked about periods, we talked about femininity, we talked about our vaginas. Like, it was amazing. It was like, it brought us together as women. And I just felt like that part doesn't get talked about much, but it is so special when it comes to this practice and sitting on that throne and making it a focus for your 30-minute session.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Dr. Yan. I also want to know, okay, so we've actually, discussed it a little bit for your medical practice. How would you plan to, in a situation where you do think somebody could benefit from steaming? You outlined in the cases of viral, or when there's a viral situation, tears and lesions, and then also trauma. What do you think might be able to work for your practice? I did see on your blog that you have listed one of the steam practitioners, a steam therapist in your community. So is your model to be able to refer out?
So for me, I do a lot of surgery, anatomical manipulation of stuff. And so what I tell people is that there's things we do, and most of the kind of medicine that I use for hemorrhoids, all that stuff, it's especially for hemorrhoids. Like, let's talk about hemorrhoids. That's one of the indications you have for steaming as well in your training. That the medicine we have, the hemorrhoidal cream, are used to mask symptoms. You have lidocaine with the hemorrhoidal cream that masks the symptoms, that numbs it, but it doesn't fix the problem. So what fixes the problem is changing, like all the things that Dr. White was talking about. It's a lifestyle change. It's changing your diet. The part that I use heat for is the sitz bath, because it really brings vessels, dilates the vessels, brings oxygen to the area. And then I tell people sometimes they can do Epsom salt, magnesium, and it helps with the healing. So again, bringing in all the different things that can help with the healing and the heat as well. So I do have a lot of, there's many people here in Maui that are so open to integrative medicine and that wholeness of medicine that I do tell them that this is not something I do in clinic, because I haven't built a practice like Dr. White, where everybody is there. That is so amazing, Dr. White. I feel like that should be a model to women's health and just general health, and and just spread it all over. If you want to build a clinic here, I would love to help you.
I'm there.
Yeah, you already have a place here, so let's build one.
Yes.
And then, yeah, so I do tell them these are the things that are available in the community. Like even with gallbladder disease, I say, I offer you surgery for this. And if you're hesitating, talk to this somebody, because they can give you a different perspective. But I tell them all the different risks and benefits, and mostly risk of waiting for surgery, because those are the things we have to highly stress to people. But I do steer them to other practitioners in the area that could give them more knowledge, because to me, it's like the more knowledge you're equipped with and different ways of looking at what you have, then you really make an informed decision in doing that surgery, in getting the hysterectomy, in getting the gallbladder surgery. For me, it's not, I don't have any ego thing attached to my knowledge, because I know it's partial. All our knowledge is partial. So the more they can speak to other people practicing different things, then they come to me and they're like, I've made my decision. I want the surgery. I feel good. I feel like, yes, okay, let's do it. Because then you will be in a better place. You won't have hesitation, no stress, no cortisol during the surgery. Your healing goes well. Those are all important to me. Like I feel like we can work well together with other practitioners if there's just that openness.
And I think that is the basis of integrative work. We've been blessed that we have, everybody under one roof, but that was the main thing, is like, I know my limitations. With all the education, with all the knowledge, with all the books that I've read, with all the experiences that I have, I know I'm only one person and my capabilities are limited. And I know that there's so many other things and modalities that are existing, and that's someone else's subject matter expertise. It's not mine. And that's somebody else's lane of expertise. It's not mine. But I do know that if we work together, we can go farther. We can go faster. We can get there in a better way, in a whole person way, than if I'm just trying to tackle something, just with acupuncture or just with, changing your diet, because that's just not as efficient. And all the time I tell people, this is not you have surgery or you have acupuncture appointments. That's not what this is. Sometimes you may need surgery, but let's go into surgery in the best shape that you can be in pre-surgery. Like you said, let's not have anxiety about it. Let's know that, okay, you know what? I'm walking into this in my fullness, into this surgical intervention, knowing that I'm going to also do the work to maintain whatever happens subsequently. Or vice versa. Like, you've already had a surgery. There's no shame in that. Yes, your fibroids are back or whatever it is. But now let's work to, address this from a whole person perspective. And it's not a one or the other. It's a both and. And I think that's where the benefit of having an integrative approach to care truly outweighs, one or the other. Because again, it's not all one way. It's not all the other way. It's working together to get the benefits of both worlds.
And I have patients who just want to do Western medicine, and I offer them surgery. And what I'm getting at is, I want my patients to be at peace with their decisions, because once that peace is there, then half the battle is won. You've gone from not knowing what you have to somebody like myself, like a doctor, naming what you have. Then you've gone to accepting what you have, and then then you go from accepting the stuff you need to do to heal yourself and to get better. Then there's peace there. And when there's peace, there's not many things that can go wrong, because whatever goes wrong, you also have that acceptance. It's just like, I want to give my patients the best overall rounded knowledge about what they have. And I point them to different practitioners that can give them that rounded feeling. And when they come to me with peace and say, I want to do this, then it feels like healing has started.
Right.
Wow. Yeah, you two are just models of, this idea of having informed choices and being able to educate your patients to be able to make those. I actually, just because she's here today, I actually wanted to look at, we have Liz Ramirez, who's joined this meeting, and she has been in the Steamy Chick Institute taking the courses and sharing and part actively in all the discussions. And so I've learned a little bit about her and what her journey with her doctor was so different than what her experience would have been like had one of you been her doctors. And she also was dealing with fibroids. And I asked her if she would be willing to share a little bit about what her experience with fibroids and her doctor and steaming has been, and she said that she would. So Liz, hello. You are still on mute.
Mute. Okay. Okay.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having this discussion. This is awesome. The more we can do to get the word out. How much time do you want me to make this in? Because it could be long or it could be
short.
Give
us like 2 or 3 minutes. Okay. Give us like perfect. 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so
tell us your story. She has a fibroid story that's pretty incredible.
Yes. Okay, I'll try to make it short. So in 2020, I was experiencing recurring urinary tract infections, like one right after the other, after the other, after the other. And I tried changing my diet. I tried taking caffeine out. I tried taking alcohol out of my diet. I was doing all the things that I could at home, but still they persisted. And so I went to get checked out, and turns out my bladder was fine, but there was something pressing on my bladder from the outside. So then I was referred to a gynecologist. And to be fair, I hadn't been to a gynecologist in a while, but I went and we had just a regular like checkup, a pap smear or whatever. And afterwards she told me, and we did some imaging, obviously. And then she told me, you have uterine fibroids, and your treatment option is a hysterectomy. And so this all hit me like really hard because, well, that first of all, like having a diagnosis like that, but then,
that's it.
Yeah.
Just one option.
My first and only treatment option was a full hysterectomy. So I was obviously just super emotional, and I went home and started to dig into, learn more about what fibroids are and what were their cause. Like I had never heard of fibroids before. Come to find out, this is super prevalent. 80% of women experience this at some point in their lives, and it disproportionately affects women of color. Black women in particular are much more prone and start much earlier with conditions like this. And anyways, so I started looking for other options. And the main things I was dealing with was I was having extreme pelvic pain, and which was affecting my regular life. I was basically bedridden. I would get my kids off to school, start trying to clean, and then have to go lay down. And I was so tired all the time. Now looking back, I understand I was anemic, but at the time I didn't know that. And so the anemia was causing like my body to just not be able to have the strength to function. And so like I would lay down to take a nap and have to set an alarm because I was afraid I'd miss picking up my kids. And so I started listening to podcasts, and I found a podcast by Keli Garza and by you, and she was talking about vaginal steaming. I had never heard of this before. I was all like, oh, I mean, hey, maybe this can help me. So I found a way to I had a pot, obviously, and I just used some salt in the water, and it was just so, even though I was squatting, which is not the best position, the relief I instantly felt in my body, and it addressed the pain that I was feeling. And so I was like, this is the medicine. This is what everybody needs. Like, I didn't know if it was addressing my fibroids specifically, but it was dealing with helping with the pain that I was dealing with. And so I started using it in my daily regimen. Then I found a holistic doctor and have been using, I found out that I had severe inflammation in my body caused by a condition called MTHFR. It's a genetic mutation that causes your body to not produce glutathione, which was one of the main detoxifiers of the body. So my body doesn't do that. And I didn't know this. My whole life, I've been living with this lack of being able to detoxify. So, you know, the piece of like my fibroids are affected by your hormone levels. But my holistic doctor also told me that, like, if you didn't have the inflammation piece, they wouldn't be growing so fast. They grew, like when we had lockdown, they grew almost overnight to the point that I looked like I was like 5 or 6 months pregnant. And through steaming and also other healing modalities, you know, I did change my diet. I've been taking supplements to help shrink them and stuff. But without the steaming, I never would have been able to go the holistic route. I would have had to have the surgery because I wasn't able to continue with a good quality of life. I wasn't able to function. So the steaming allowed me to pursue holistic outlets for dealing with my fibroids. And they have shrunk. So I started with a 14-week size fibroid, a 14-week size uterus. And then the fibroid shrunk. I had 4 fibroids and now I only have 3. And my abdomen, like shrunk down, like I don't look like I'm pregnant anymore. I'm still on the journey. I still have fibroids. I'm not done. But what I'm saying is that treating this holistically is, you know, the right way to go, because you're treating the root cause of the problem. I did go to a surgical consult when they told me that I had to have a hysterectomy, and I asked the doctor, well, so if I remove my uterus, then what? Will I not have fibroids anymore? Well, no, that's not actually true. Your fibroids could come back and they can grow on other parts of your reproductive organs. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the steaming and the holistic approach of like changing your diet and working with herbs to heal yourself is treating the root cause, as opposed to treating like cutting out, you know, the quote unquote diseased organ, but not really dealing with the root cause of the problem, you know. So I mean, that's a short
thank you so much, Liz. Yeah, okay, so then can you explain to people what your period was like before, and
yes,
what your period is like now? Because I think that's a really key piece, is that the fibroids didn't go away right away. Like, it's not like they just disappeared overnight, but it made it so that you could live your life, right? Because you had your periods changed and were more manageable, and your pain was more manageable. You were able to get your life under, you know, you were able to live your life. So you were able to have the energy even to make some of those lifestyle changes.
Yes, exactly.
That's right. So but can you give us, like, just, you know, how many days was it before? How many days is it now? Pain level before, pain level now?
Okay. So I was dealing with like 8 to 10 day periods. They were extremely heavy. My fibroids are in the walls of the uterus. So it really antagonizes the uterus during the period. And so I was dealing with so much pain that I was like doubled over, and, you know, I could barely function or work during my periods. Obviously, I also wasn't taught proper period care. So I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to be wearing tampons, you know, or plug products that can make your uterus worse. And that probably contributed to the beginning of my fibroids as well. And obviously the pain, like after a day of barely, like I said, I was like napping a lot, but just cooking a meal, I felt like all my organs were going to fall out. Like and I had to go lay down. Like it was just, but once I found steaming, that feeling like my organs are going to fall out was gone. The pain also I was dealing with was gone. My periods went from these, I was having like 5 days of brown, 2 days of red, and then another, 3 more days of the brown residue, right? So a lot of old stagnation. Once I started steaming, my periods got shorter. So it went from like 8 to 10 days to 6 days. And then they got, at first, when I first started steaming, a lot of stuff came out, a lot of clots, a lot of brown and black blood, like all this stuff coming out. And that is clearly old residue that was in my uterus. I even had what looked like paint chips come out. Like they look like, it's so weird to describe. Yeah. Like they look like paint chips. That's the only word I can use to describe. And I was all like, what is happening? So at first there was more stuff coming out, like the periods got like, you could say not worse, but like all this stuff was coming out, cleansing. Now my periods are 4 days. And if I rest, they're only 2 days. So it's crazy. Like, and there's no pain. Like I haven't had pain in my periods since I've started steaming. No pain, which is insane. Insane. Yes.
Liz, I'm so happy for you. And can you tell people how long has it been since your first steam session?
Oh,
like how many months into this? Over 2 years.
Oh, no, I've been steaming for over 2 years. After the first steam, I started seeing, on my next period, I started seeing, I immediately was able to address my pain symptoms immediately. Like and so I started using it whenever I would feel that, everything hurts so much. Like I feel like my organs are going to fall out. I would use it then. And it would take that feeling completely away. And then after my first steam, then my next period, I had the cleansing and immediately my period started moving. And of course I got way better results when I started using the Steamy Chick herbs. At first I was just using, I have herbs in my garden. So I was using just like one herb or, something else. But when I started using the blends, that's when I started to see, a lot of changes in my cycle and a lot of changes. And it's just been like, when I tried it, I was like, I need to learn how to do this for everybody. So anyways.
Yes. So incredible. Thank you so much for
Absolutely.
sharing. And I think what's really, important to understand here is that Liz did start on her own. She started just using salt or just using a little of what she had on hand. And I do think that people can and should start as fast as possible steaming weekly, and then get in with a steam therapist. Make that appointment, because if you get that custom blend based on your body and your cycle type and what your issues are, and you get that custom steam schedule, you're going to have much faster results. And just so you guys know, I do set people, sometimes I give them steam schedules to steam every single day, but also not everybody can do that. That can be really harmful for some people. So I can do that screening. My practitioners can do that screening to see if we want to get you on that schedule, or if you really just need to do, some people can only steam one time a month, right? And working with that practitioner and having that follow-up, like Dr. White said, she changed the herbs after a while. I like to work with somebody, especially the first 2 or 3 months. I might be changing those herbs and schedules quite a bit until we get what that, ongoing, schedule will be. And I think another thing that I want to highlight here is that the pain became more manageable immediately. That's what I've seen with fibroids. With fibroids, I'm like, look, this is, dedicate a year, I say 6 to 12 months. And, again, if you're working with me, I have very accelerated, very, targeted steam schedules that I'm working with people. So I say dedicate 6 to 12 months, right? And then you want to look at that difference in those fibroids. But what I do know is that immediately people are going to find relief. That's what I've seen. I've seen immediate relief and immediate period changes. And so ultimately, once that happens, then I feel like people are more relaxed. It's like, okay, if you're not dealing with pain, if you're not dealing with, a disruption in your function of life, then you can take a year or to deal with these fibroids, right? Because the reason why people have to do the hysterectomy or go for the surgeries are because they can't function, right? Their quality of life, they're not able to continue, right? But fibroids themselves, having them isn't something that, is an emergency. It's that change in that quality of life that makes people, I think, go into that. And also that they don't have doctors like Dr. White and Dr. Yan, and that's the only option that they've been given. So they don't know what else to do. Right. So anyways, thank you so much, Liz, just to hear like somebody's, real experience with it. I think that, again, for anybody in the medical field listening, I want them to know what that experience was like for you. And I really want, doctors and people in the medical field to start finding those steam therapists in their community. Dr. White, grew up steaming. She had her own experience with it. She also still works with has a steam facilitator on her staff. That's one model of care. Dr. Yan found the steam practitioners in her community and is able to refer to the steam practitioners and give her patients can go talk to the steam therapists, learn their options there, and then are still under Dr. Yan's care and can let her know how they want to move forward, whether they want to try that first or whether they're ready to move into surgery. I mean, there's different models of how this can work, but
right.
Ultimately, you're going to have better I think patients, people are going to feel better having options, knowing whether they want to do the steaming or whether or not they want to, it's just better to have all of the options.
For sure.
And to realize that this can work together very seamlessly and have those better results. I mean, isn't it better to work with a patient who's not in pain versus one who is in pain, right? Like, even when you're just trying to have a conversation with somebody and look in their eyes, it's better to be talking to somebody who's not in pain, right? In another case, somebody was steaming and they were steaming for their fibroids, but her fibroids were so large, she just figured, I want to do this surgery and just be able to start fresh, but use the steaming to hopefully prevent any fibroids from reoccurring. And she went into the surgery and she said her doctor was like, your fibroids were a different texture than anybody else's. They just came out so easily. They were like, almost like, it was like taking out Jello. And that was very different than her other experiences with fibroids, right? And this is somebody who cuts out fibroids, every day of her job. And she had never seen fibroids like these fibroids. Me and, her patient believed that it was because she was doing that steaming, right? And so, it can be used in different ways, but ultimately, what I hope people will take away from this is that it's beneficial, and it doesn't have to be something that people go onto Instagram or have to go into these Facebook groups, in some corner of the web to be able to find out about, like it's doctors that people go to consult with about their medical conditions. So doctors, and other medical professionals should be able to let people know about these options. And again, you don't have to have all of the knowledge yourself. It could be, something that you might want to try if you don't want surgery, if you're not interested in this option would be this, and keep on seeing me. I'll see you in 3 months. We'll see if you're able to have any results with those, with these other options, right? It doesn't mean that the person isn't under your care either, right? So anyways, with that, I would actually want to go back to Dr. White. We have been here, you guys, almost going on 2 hours. I knew it was going to be 2 hours. And so I want to go back to Dr. White and then just talk about, I just really love this model of care that you've set up. Again, when Dr. Yan heard it, she's like, I want to set up a clinic like that. That sounds incredible. In a perfect model of care, which perhaps you have created, how do you see STEAM integrated into a private practice? And how would you see STEAM integrated into a hospital setting? Like how would you see that, somebody who has so much experience using STEAM with your patients?
Yeah, I think kind of like Dr. Yan said, and we are building. I don't even feel it's where I would like it to be yet, because there's still so many other practitioners that I'm excited to bring onto our team. Because again, when you find like, oh, I have to refer out, not that I don't want to refer out, because I readily do, it just shows there's a need for that. And I have a public health background, and it's important to me, not just the access, but also making sure that we can provide appropriate care. Is it affordable? Is it going to serve the purpose? Is it adequate? Is it going to serve the purpose that it's actually intention? And is it going to be, appropriate on the bigger scheme of things? So looking at, all of those different aspects, and part of that is continuity of care. I don't want someone who comes to us, experiencing trauma or whatever it is, to have to explain the same story that she has explained over the last 3, 6, potentially a year, over and over and over and over again. Because after you say, you know, that same story, it just becomes a part of you. Every time you tell it, it's becoming internalized. Every time you tell it, you're also being re-traumatized. And so now we're kind of dealing with someone who's just constantly being beat down, not only because they're not moving any closer to healing, but because they're having to tell this story over and over and over and over and over. And that's one thing that I you know, tell our clientele: you're going to tell the story no matter who you speak to. You're going to tell the story one time, and it's the team members' responsibility to share it with the team, because we haven't internalized it. Our approach is to look at how we can heal it, and not in a place of trauma or just repetition, or that we're internalizing it. And I think continuity of care is so important, and it's so important to the healing process, so that you can get to the business of the work and not the business of jumping from practitioner to practitioner and, you know, trying this thing for, you know, a month and this thing for the next month. And sometimes people are going to multiple practitioners. They come in with a slew of supplements. They don't even remember why they started taking supplement number 1. And now we're on supplement number 18. And I'm like, well, what are you taking this for? I don't remember. How often are you taking it? What does it say on the bottle? Okay, well, this supplement cancels out this supplement, or this supplement, potentiates, you know, this supplement. So like, this shouldn't be going, oh, and you have high blood pressure, then you definitely shouldn't be taking this. And it's like, there's no continuity of care. And you wind up with like very expensive urine, because none of the things are being metabolized the way they were intended. So I feel like that's one of the benefits of our approach to care, because everyone's under the same roof. You talk about your condition one time, the next time you see us, we're about that work. We're about getting to the healing aspects and the healing component. In the hospital setting, definitely for, you know, labor and delivery, and in the postpartum setting, I mean, vaginal steaming could be doing wonders to eliminate maternal morbidity and mortality. One, avoiding having a C-section altogether. One, helping that person relax. 2, opening up that cervix, softening and ripening that cervix. It's not just about, a lot of times people talk about, oh, how far are you dilated? Guess what, pumpkin? You're not going to dilate until your cervix is soft, until your cervix is effaced. So vaginal steaming can definitely help that process. And you can move from the different phases of labor so much quicker, because 1, you're relaxed. 2, your cervix is ripening and effacing at the same time. And 3, it just makes for a more relaxed, you know, passage in terms of delivery. So I definitely see it as a use. I wish it could be built into, you know, that labor and delivery time, and definitely postpartum, from the time, you know, baby is out and mom is nursing. You can be nursing and sitting on the steam throne all at the same time. We have people do it, right? Because again, they were like, oh, you know, it's really hard to bring the baby. I was like, you can bring your baby. One of us will deal with your baby, and you know, or, you know, baby has to nurse. You can still steam while you're nursing. It's all good. And it actually heightens that experience, that bonding experience, because you're getting nurtured from head to toe. And so I definitely feel like there is so much room for, and even in Europe, they're already doing this. So my thing is, we're already behind like everything else, but we could be doing this definitely in the hospital setting, specifically during labor and delivery and the postpartum period.
Wow. Okay. Dr. White, let's end it with what services you have that you offer, and how people can get in touch with you.
Okay, I went through the whole list, but we're expanding. Right now we're in Columbia, Maryland, and we're getting ready to open up an office in Arlington, Virginia. It's going to wind up being our main office, because it's bigger, it's better, it's wonderful. I'm in love with it. And we'll be able to house all the practitioners, because now we're having like space issues, and it's like, everything kind of getting wonky. And we're trying to still under the guise of COVID. More people are coming in, but we need more space to make sure everyone's, you know, maintaining their safety. So we're looking forward to, you know, opening this, our second office. You can find the center on Instagram at the Eudaimonia Center. Eudaimonia, I put it in the chat earlier on. It's a weird name. It's Eudaimonia. Eudaimonia means human flourishing. And everything we do, it's designed to help you flourish spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, vocationally, all the, aspects of the wellness wheel, that's what we're here for. And addressing your complex women's health challenges is just for that reason. And steaming plays a big role in that process, because it's not just about the reproductive health system. When you're sitting on that steam throne, that's emotional release oftentimes. That is just your time to not be bothered by anyone else. I still steam, and I use that half an hour because I know no one's going to interrupt me. My phone's not going to ring. No one's going to be calling my name because they can't find me, because I am somewhere secluded. And it's that half an hour of the entire week that I know I'm untouchable. And it sounds like, okay, 30 minutes, it's only 30 minutes. But when you know there's not going to be a phone ringing or, a patient calling or anything else, it's just that time to be. And I cherish that. I mean, I still do. Again, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but yes, I've been steaming for probably a lot longer than, some of you are old. And it's just been, it's a beautiful time. And it's more than just the reproductive system. And I think so many people think, oh, it's about just the reproductive apparatus. No, it's about your whole body, and really taking the time to not just get in touch with your reproductive system, but get in touch with your emotions, get in touch with the things that are stressing you, and really being able to treat your body like the sanctuary that it is.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And when you mentioned postpartum, actually somebody shared in the chat, she said, Lisa, she shared, I steamed in the 3 weeks after my second baby was born. Massive difference in my recovery from my first. And that's something that I hear. I love second time, or third time, parents who are like, whoa, this is very, very different, recovery time and much faster. And, Adina is sharing, she says, steaming is everything. I've cried, I've laughed, I've meditated. It is so amazing. Thank you for spreading the word. And yeah, I think that is so cool. I mean, I love to imagine, a hospital or a doctor setting where, why not? Why can't the nurses be trained steam therapists? And, even before you go in for your pap smear, I mean, there's some waiting time, why not be able to steam and have that relaxation before you go in? I don't see why not, right? Why not, when you're in the labor and delivery and then you transfer over and you're waiting to, make sure that you're able to, all the things that need to happen before somebody's released. Why shouldn't the nurses? It just takes water and salt, and you can use a geriatric chair, which is already available, right? There's all of the tools needed, and I would love to see more, medical staff themselves trained in how to, as steam therapists, because there's so many moments where it would make such a big difference, and Dr. Yan mentioned that too, is just being able to sit there and focus on that part of the body. She said helps to alleviate trauma, she said something along those lines, or it helps to release trauma, or it helps with trauma.
Yeah.
Right. And so trauma is something that happens in the hospital, right? After a surgery or after a birth. I mean, it's all, so just that idea of being able to relax somebody, why not, like make that a better experience. I know you set up your offices
for some
to be like a spa. Why not?
Exam, whether it be our pelvic floor physical therapist or myself, I can't even do a digital exam because of someone's trauma. And we're not going to re-traumatize you by trying to, re-traumatize you. And so steaming is sometimes that bridge to, okay, there's something else going on, but let's get to a point that we're not doing anything invasive. We're not even doing a digital exam for your pap smear. We're not doing any of that. We're not trying to address your pelvic floor physical therapy. We're not trying to get you to relax those muscles so that we can further investigate. And to see someone who hasn't had pap smear in years because they can't even, their fingers will not, the digital exam is impossible, or that they're so traumatized that the whole experience is just too much. Starting them on the steam throne, there's a lot of emotional release, again, releases some of that trauma, but it's also relaxing that area so that a digital exam is made possible and we can investigate further in terms of what else could be going on. So again, it's so multifactorial, and it just is.
Dr. White, I know you got to go, but yes, I mean, such a great point. I had sexual abuse in my background. I was raped, right? And so because of that, right, I went to the gynecologist after the experience. That was part of, what happened afterwards. And it was painful. The gynecologist was painful. I felt like it re-traumatized what I had gone through. And so then I never went
back.
Again. So you're absolutely right. Because of trauma, people just won't even be able to access their doctor, right? Because it's just like, no, I don't want to, right? So imagine after, a sexual violation happens, or what I like to imagine too is that when somebody goes in for their 6-week postpartum checkup, a lot of times the doctor will, say that somebody can return to sex. Well, what if you did a steam for somebody at that time that, during that visit, then hopefully the return to sex would not be painful. And with that, there's people now blowing up in the chat.
By the time you get to your 6-week visit, you're all good. Like you'll want to have sex because the healing has started. And I think a lot of times
exactly
you can't.
That too.
Postpartum period ends at 6 weeks. No, boo boo. It starts at 6 weeks. You can be doing things. Your healing starts the moment the baby leaves the vaginal canal. That's when the healing starts. And breastfeeding and everything else and steaming are part of that healing process. But you're still in you're still in postpartum until the next baby comes.
Okay, there you go.
Again, I'm gonna have to go. But again,
so somebody shared in the chat. It's wonderful. I'm 56. I wish I had found. Okay.
Yeah, I'll see you.
Oh my gosh, she's incredible. So somebody shared, it's wonderful. I'm 56 and wish I had found this before I chose to get a hysterectomy for fibroids and endometriosis. Yeah. Those who had issues with sex being painful, steam helps. Gosh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm going the wrong way. Those who had issues with sex being painful, steam helps your life. And so, yeah, that is, that post-hysterectomy, steaming, that is something that people report, is that it helps with being able to return to, painless sex afterwards. So I'm glad that at least you were able to find it for that. And yes, we got to stop. So many doctors only give people the option of the hysterectomy, right? And then Liz shares, I had a birth injury after my first due to an episiotomy. I didn't find steaming until my son was 12. But the scar tissue, which was still causing pain all these years later, was completely healed from steaming. It's incredible, incredible. Okay, everybody. Oh, and then somebody else, Lisa shares again, my biggest difference after steaming postpartum was that I actually wanted sex, whereas after my first, I couldn't stand the idea. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, everybody, this has been so incredible. As far as Dr. Yan, she is available at folkmdwander.com, and her Instagram is also folkmdwander, and she has a blog, and she is interested in writing a little bit more about different folk medicine practices, and she has a form where you can submit your experiences, and she can talk about them, and she sends her your steam stories, and she can explain it. She can explain maybe why you wanted sex afterwards, or why after the hysterectomy, why, the steaming was able to help there. She can explain all of this stuff. So send in your stories to her, and that we could see in her blog, her explaining it in these medical terms, which I think is, just so incredible. Such a gift that she has to be able to do that. And then I just want to thank again, our sponsor, KISS Experience. So Kiana is the owner of KISS Experience, and Kiana is a trained peristeam facilitator and certified. She has also taken a lot of my higher level classes and is a peristeam hydrotherapist in training. She does virtual consultations for anybody who isn't in her area. She is in outside of Charlotte. She's right outside of Charlotte, I believe South Carolina. And but either way, her website is kissexperience.com, KYSS experience.com, and she is available to be able to do those types of consultations. She works with people virtually to give people custom steam herb blends and schedules for issues such as endometriosis, fibroids, pain during sex, and some of the other things that we brought up here. All right. So again, thank you so much for our sponsor, KISS, and for everybody for attending, and to our wonderful doctors, Dr. Yan and Dr. White. I will send this out afterwards with all of these links as well. Make sure that you are on my mailing list at steamychick.com to be able to make sure that you receive that. Thank you guys, everybody, so much. You are all so wonderful. Continue to spread the word.